Well, hello again and welcome to our higher education panel. I'm Matt Ormiston, your host for this session. And wow, we had some powerful presentations and I'm really looking forward to this session and how neurodiversity hubs are supporting and celebrating neurodiverse students. We heard from Charlotte yesterday the desperate need for change in the way we curate and deliver education. And this morning, Tammy talked about busting the myths that neurodiverse people only need to disclose once. I recall when we first started discussing the concept of neurodiversity hubs, these topics were poignant considerations. So in this session, we will be hearing from a number of educational institutions involved in the neurodiversity hubs, both locally and internationally. We'll commence with a video of US universities and colleges, followed by a live presentation from local universities and TAFE. So the session will be moderated by Andrew Eddy, who's the CEO of Untapped, and shout out to Andrew, who's doing an amazing job of disrupting how we employ and sustain neurodiverse people in our organisations. But before I hand over to Andrew, I'd like to let you know that you have the opportunity to submit questions for our panel by typing your questions into the Q&A pane. You can access that pane by clicking on the Q&A tab on the right-hand side of your screen. You will see other people's questions appear in your Q&A pane and once they've been approved by our moderators. And if you like a question and are keen to hear it answered, you can give it an upvote by clicking on the arrow beside it. We'll try and answer as many questions as we can, but that will depend on how many that we get through. So we might not be able to get to all of them, but we'll do our best. And for me, that's enough. And I take it away over to Andrew.
Thanks, Matt. My name is Andrew Eddy from Untapped Holdings. We're going to start the session with a pre-recorded discussion from the Alliance of Autism College to Employment Programs, aka the Alliance in the USA. This is an association of universities, colleges, and other organizations which comprise Drexel University, Westchester University, University of Delaware, Bellevue College, College Autism Spectrum, and the Rochester Institute of Technology. We will then have some live presentations from Curtin University, Trobe University, and TAFE New South Wales. Thank you. Can we now cue the recording?
Thank you for joining us. I'm just going to now introduce the group, starting with Amy, who's going to talk about the Alliance group. So over to Amy Edwards at Drexel.
So, hi everyone, I am Dr. Amy Edwards. I am the director of the Drexel Autism Support Program at Drexel University in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. We've recently created what is called the Alliance. So the Alliance is the Alliance of Autism College to Employment Programs, aka the Alliance. And the tagline is resources for programs by programs. So it's an association for research-minded practitioners who are dedicated to autistic college student success and building inclusive campus communities. So the vision for the Alliance was developed by several of us who are in the field who realized there was a need for a centralized location to share resources, create standards, and develop guidelines with other professionals in the field. So, you know, the gaps that we address, excuse me, there's a lack of collaborative space for higher education professionals to improve the landscape for autistic students. There's an absence of program standards and benchmarks. There's also a shortage of connections from college to employment. We collaborate closely with other entities such as the Neurodiversity Hub and the College Autism Network. And I'm pleased to announce the first iteration of our website should be live in about a month or so. So when it is, we hope programs like ours, you know, across the globe will join the Alliance and find this collaboration helpful. The website for that is collegeautismalliance.com. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about the Drexel Autism Support Program. So DASP is for current matriculated students at Drexel. They have to go through the typical admission process, just like any other student. And we're designed kind of to help with everything, you know, students who can get accepted academically, but kind of need help around everything else. So we help with academic and social skills, self-advocacy, interpersonal skills, independent living, workplace skills. We really want students to take advantage of university life, develop the skills needed to pursue career opportunities, and really lead a full life. We value neurodiversity and all the benefits that diversity contributes to the greater society. So we offer, you know, one-on-one peer mentoring, coaching. We have a 1.5 credit course that we offer the first 3 terms. that helps with the transition to college. We have workshops on employment skills, social development, and planning for academic and career. We have several social events. We have collaborations with other campus departments, such as the Dragons Prep program, which is a transition program in the beginning of a freshman's education. It's the summer before freshman year. And then I would say the thing that's different about Drexel is that we offer a co-op. So it's cooperative education. Students are typically at Drexel for about 5 years. They take 3 6-month co-op experiences. So when they graduate, they not only graduate with a degree, they also graduate with 18 months of employment experience. This is even more important for our students because a lot of them have difficulty getting employment. So it's very helpful with that as well. So I'm going to pass it over to Sheri.
Thanks, Amy. My name is Sheri Fishbaugh, and I'm the Director of Autism Services over at Westchester University in Westchester, Pennsylvania. Our program is called DCAP, or otherwise Dub-C Autism Program. Dub-C is literally just slang for Westchester, W, C for Chester. At our program, I feel like I always have to explain that. At our program, we help, similar to Amy talking about matriculated students who are at Westchester who go through admissions process, just like everyone else. And then they apply to DCAP to become part of our program. We assist in 5 main areas. So the interpersonal skills, the executive functioning, self-advocacy, career prep, and independence as they are here. The students devise their own goals and we help meet them where they are via one-to-one meetings with staff, as well as group meetings. They do have study hall and quiet time where they can come in and study here at DCAP. Also, hangouts are every day of the week where they can come and they know that they will have somebody to hang out, go uptown, get something to eat. They're all involved in committees as well as community involvement. So they all volunteer at least one time throughout the semester in the community. And then also we have an employment readiness type of program. So some of the unique things here at DCAP is when I think about that employment readiness program, we do have a convenience store called the Ram Shop that is completely student run, that is inclusive in that it's DCAP students as well as university students who do not identify as being a DCAP member.
Hi, everyone. My name is Wes Garton. I'm the program manager for Spectrum Scholars, University of Delaware's College to Career Initiative for undergraduate students with autism. I'm really excited to be here and talk a little bit more about our program. So like my colleagues Sheri and Amy, Spectrum Scholars is designed to support and empower autistic students towards becoming more independent, living self-determined lives while in college. So like our colleagues, we offer a wide range of services that students are able to access. In Spectrum Scholars, we actually use a multi-tiered system of support that provides services both individually and in groups for students. So for the most comprehensive services, we do, just like Sheri and Amy said, a lot of one-on-one meeting with students on goal development, developing skills in areas related to academics, executive functioning, social and campus engagement, and so forth. We also collaborate very keenly with our campus partners, such as the Counseling Center, on the development and implementation of some curriculum to help students in small groups work on social skill development. We also see it as part of our mission in Spectrum Scholars to educate and to train our campus faculty, staff, towards making University of Delaware a more autism-friendly campus. So when you put the 3 of those tiers together, we have a nice little pyramid graphic that we like to use that helps to illustrate how Spectrum Scholars' mission is designed. So I think that's one thing that makes us maybe not unique, because I know everyone in this call does similar kinds of things, but that we take an approach of offering both high intensive, comprehensive supports, as well as small groups, and access for trainings and resources for staff. One other thing I like to mention, and it's truly a blessing, is that Spectrum Scholars is in a partnership with the JP Morgan Chase Corporation, so that allows our program to be accessible to students with no fee. If I had one tip or piece of advice for someone looking to do a college autism support program, it would be to be intentional and to also really use your campus partners to create the program as comprehensive as possible. No one can do all this work by themselves. There's just too much at stake. So I would definitely encourage authentic campus collaboration. Now I'm going to turn it over to Sarah.
Thanks, Wes. Yes, I think we all have a lot of really similar things that we do in supporting our students. And I'm very excited to be here. Thank you for inviting me, Andrew. I'm Sarah Sanders Gardner. I'm the director of Bellevue College's Neurodiversity Navigators program. Until 2020, we served autistic students only, and now we serve all students who identify as neurodivergent. A couple of unique things about our program: we are not under Disability Services. We're under the Rise Learning Institute and then under the Center for Career Connections. And like Drexel, we have instruction that our students take. We have a 2 or 3 year series of courses that our students can take that are designed for career preparation. And the 4 areas that we focus on with our students are executive functioning, self-advocacy, self-regulation, and social interaction, not to be confused with social skills. So I'm autistic myself, and I have a little bit of a different take on whether students need to be taught social skills or social interaction, which is a little bit different. That's a much longer conversation. However, we do all the other things, right? A summer orientation, small groups, one-on-one, peer mentors. Like University of Delaware, we have no fee. We are supported by the college. Students do pay for the classes that they take. They're getting academic credit that stacks with most of their degrees. My biggest tip for everyone starting a program like this would be to not create a college within a college. As Wes mentioned, use your campus resources. Send your students to tutoring. Don't bring tutoring into your center. Send your students to academic advising. They are college students. They need to do all the things that college students do with some supports in getting there, maybe in setting the appointments, etc. And that's what we do. Our peer mentors support them in accessing those things. They don't do those things for them or even with them. They just support them in getting those appointments and in knowing when and how they need to do those. So that's really Neurodiversity Navigators.
I'm very excited to be here with all of my colleagues today and Andrew, and thank you for having us. I'm Jane Thierfeld-Brown. I'm the director of College Autism Spectrum, and our group is a little bit different than the other groups represented here today. My colleagues and I have been working with students with autism on college campuses since 1998. And we started off small, trying to infuse some training onto college campuses. Our group, called College Autism Spectrum, works with K-12 institutions. We work with colleges and we work with families to try and broaden the opportunities for any students with autism. The interesting thing in the US is how things have grown over the years. In 2000, there were 2 programs in the country that worked with autistic college students. In 2005, we were up to 8. In 2008, we went all the way up to 15. And I'm thrilled to say in 2021, we have about 70 programs embedded within colleges for degree-seeking students that have enhanced services for students with autism, represented by some of the wonderful professionals here with you today. Our group is, we do trainings, we do advocacy and organization. We help people with transition from high school to college and college to work. And one of the things we've worked very hard on over the years is the transition from the high school setting to the college setting and trying to train high school professionals in what's truly needed for autistic students to be prepared for adult life, including college life. The change in the US in this field has been enormous over the past 20 years. And we've seen not only the growth of programs. But of course, as in your countries, we've seen a huge increase in the population of students with autism. So we need to vastly increase these programs around the globe to be able to educate more autistic young people and assist them to go on to competitive employment and fruitful adult lives. And that's what all of us are all about.
Thank you, Jane. Also part of the Alliance group is Rochester Institute of Technology, and the leader of the Spectrum Support Program there is Laurie Ackles. Unfortunately, Laurie wasn't able to join us today, but you can see her website link for her program on the screen, and there's some great resources there, so recommend people have a look at that if they want to find out more. Thank you. What are some things that you think that you do in your programs that help students achieve sustainable employment? So would anyone like to jump in on that?
So I think one of the things is something that actually Wes had talked about is looking out to your community partners. And so partnering with the Career Development Center is huge. I know here at Westchester, we partner with them. We have a liaison with right within our Career Development Center. They come in and do workshops monthly with our students. And in addition, we started a CoM event, which is called a Connect and Learn Meetup, that's specifically for our students. And we actually look at area employers and bring them in and have our students stand at a table, whatever interests they have, right, their majors, and the employers go around to them and talk about what jobs they have available. And it also gives our students times to, one, practice their 30-second elevator pitch, and two, be able to be in a more natural, more less anxiety, I should say, environment of where they can just have a conversation, because they're not coming out of there with an automatic job. It's just to practice those skills. So that's one of the things that we help our students with.
Thank you, Sheri. Anyone else like to comment on that? Yes, Sarah.
Yeah, so because we're part of the Center for Career Connections, we have a lot of those connections with our students. We will be starting a neurodiversity hiring program. I know RIT already has one. We're going to be starting a disability hiring program as well. Last year, our Center for Career Connections held a virtual neurodiversity hiring job fair, and they have a job fair every year on campus. Last year it was virtual. So that's something we're going to be starting. And one of our large local corporations, we're very fortunate that we have a lot of the local corporations, the very large ones here, has offered to find disabled peer mentors for our students from the industry. So I think that's going to be a really nice little add-on for our students as well. So those are some of the things that we do. And of course, our educational classes that they take are all geared towards career preparation as well. We have a completely different approach than other people do, and I have a completely different philosophy than other people do. Our students get tons of practice, but it's not in a single setting, because as an autistic person, we don't transfer those skills across setting at all. Practicing it in one setting isn't going to help me in another setting. So I focus more on identity development and feeling comfortable with who they are, and self-advocacy in situations, and self-advocacy in communication, and also taking the perspective of the other person and thinking about the other person and the other person's feelings, but not that there's a way to do it or anything like that, because as an autistic person, all that does is cause anxiety and awkwardness. So we may be closer than we think, or than I think, or than you think, but that's just my approach.
As I was saying earlier about co-op, you don't have to start a relationship with a huge company. We have a couple co-op students who are in very small businesses, and it's just one student, and we're just making relationships with a lot of different small groups who are then, it's spreading the word. That, oh, we have this great student, it's a co-op student, you should really talk to Drexel about.
It's great advice, Amy. Thanks. Jane.
I agree with Amy. And one of the things that we really encourage for universities and colleges with programs to do is to start their programs with on-campus employment, similar to Sheri's program on campus. And we ask students to start with staff who we've tapped as champions for our students, maybe someone who either has worked with our program or who has a family member with autism who really understands some of the intricacies of supervising someone with autism and how to mentor them appropriately. And then after they've gained some confidence in that role, then moving on to someone who may have no exposure prior to this experience working with someone with autism, and then moving off campus to a different kind of company, because so many of our students have not had the opportunity to have work experience prior to coming to college. And that really is going to put them behind some neurotypical students if they are competing for jobs. They need something on their resume that says that they have worked and that they know how to respond to an employer, how to show up for work on time, how to dress for work, some of the more simple things that you have to have experience with prior to competitive employment after college.
You're welcome.
And Wes, any final comments?
Just to say that it's important to remember that, like Jane said, for many students who are transitioning into a college environment, it can be overwhelming. And of course, for neurotypical students, let alone for autistic students. So we try to take an approach of introducing career and exposure to career concepts in a measured way, but in a way that's very intentional, so that all students are getting the experience of coming into college as freshmen, learning a little bit about career services, resources on campus, like some of the things Sheri were saying, like those soft skills that we know are so important for maintaining a job that many autistic students might have challenges with. But then thinking about it long-term too, so that there's, there are summers, there is sophomore year and junior year, and then planning so that students are getting experiences with job shadowing or with internships, ideally paid, and having those experiences so that, like we said, they can build a network and have some of that skill when they graduate, that they're ready to go transition from college to the workforce. But remembering that it's a process, it's not always linear. Some students might have a epiphany that a certain major or a job isn't right for them, and helping to coach students in those scenarios and to understand that it's okay to switch majors, it's okay to want a different job, sometimes requires a little bit of work, but is really important since statistics show that a very high percentage of college students end up switching majors at some point.
Okay, well, thank you very much for making the time today, and thank you for sharing this information, insights, and I'm sure everyone will take a lot of value from this. Thank you. I hope everyone found that valuable, some valuable discussion. I'm now going to introduce our first presentation, which is from Curtin University. So I'd now like to introduce Elaine Hatfield-White and Jasmine McDonald from Curtin University in Perth. Both Elaine and Jasmine have lived experience of autism, and we'll be speaking to you today about the Curtin Specialist Mentoring Program, the difference they believe that the program makes and how other universities could implement it. If you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A function and we'll come back to those after all the presentations. So over to you, Jasmine and Elaine.
Thanks very much, Andrew.
Share our screen now.
We're just going to share our screen.
Yep, share your screen now, yep.
Yeah, hopefully you can all see it. So the Curtin Specialist Mentoring Program began really at a meeting in 2013 at Curtin University. I was called to the meeting with Curtin University of Western Australia and with the Telethon Kids Institute to discuss what could be done for tertiary students on the spectrum who were experiencing very high dropout rates, poor employment and life outcomes. And a fellow parent and a researcher, Dr. Teresa Kidd, and myself, we both got together after that meeting because we both felt very strongly about the idea that we really wanted to have something for tertiary students that was going to enable them to have greater success in tertiary education. My own background, I've got 2 adult children on the spectrum and one is trans. And I think the big thing that I realised over the last 30 years is that each person on the spectrum is extremely different, that their profiles have got peaks and troughs, and that there would be a need for a way to support each individual student appropriately through their journey. Teresa and I had a look at what research there was happening. There wasn't very much happening of a long-term nature within Australia at that point. So we had a look internationally, and there was some very promising mentoring programs coming out of Cambridge University and also York University. So we decided that we would adapt their mentoring programs to our program at Curtin University. So in 2014, we had about 5 students on the spectrum who were interested in gaining mentoring. So we trained about 15 postgraduate mentors to have an understanding of the variety of profiles that they would be encountering with students on the spectrum. And by the end of the year, we had a growing number of students on the spectrum who were seeking that sort of support. And this year is our 8th year, and we have had up to 80 students on the spectrum and 50 postgraduate non-AS student mentors to support them in their journey through their academics, plus the employment readiness, which we see as a fundamental part of our program. So one of the other things too that we were concerned about is that the nature of the programs that had occurred in Australia had fallen away because they were generally pilot programs. And after the initial research had been done, there was difficulty gaining extra funding for the elongation of those programs. So Dr. Teresa Kidd and myself, we decided that we would be very interested in trying to get a strong evidence base for our program, and we linked in with the Autism Cooperative Research Centre. And at the end of this presentation, we have provided much of the research that has been done in our program, and hopefully it will allow universities to see the value of such programs. But I'll hand over to Elaine now just to talk about some of the things that we found with some of the students that have accessed our program.
Hello, my name is Elaine Hatfield-White. I've worked in the programme since 2018. I'm also on the spectrum myself. I've been, sorry, what are you doing?
I'm just getting the next slide.
Oh, thank you. No, that's not working. There we go. Yeah, thank you. So we're both using one computer. So yeah, I'm just going to talk to you through some of the typical difficulties that many students we found have with autism experience at university. Communication being one of the most difficult ones, organising and following a study plan, initiating communication, particularly when asking for help, can be most difficult. Communicating with other students and on email or in person with lecturers and tutors, unit coordinators, making friends, asking a way to a lecture venue, sharing things in a lab class with other people, even buying a cup of coffee can be just something that's just a bit too beyond people at times. Walking with other students to class, and you can see the rest of the list on the screen. Undertaking work experience opportunities when they present themselves. So yeah, all of those things have been really problematic for students. And as Jasmine was saying, this is one of the reasons for starting up the programme. So I'll hand back over to Jasmine to talk about the next slide.
So the development of the model that we came up with was that we realised that it was sometimes a very difficult ask for our mentors to do, I guess, a creative understanding of who they were dealing with. So we always started off with appropriate training at the beginning of the academic year. And with myself and Elaine, we have provided access to a coordinator who is experienced in the area of autism, so that our mentors had the support that they needed if they had to try to support their mentees with difficult situations. We provide supervision on a weekly basis so that the mentors can share their own understandings of what is going on within them and their relationship with their mentee. The peer mentoring occurs on a weekly basis during the semester, and we have a common room that houses 2 enclaves where the peer mentoring can occur, or the mentees and the mentors, they can use any venues on campus that they feel comfortable with. And we also have a very thriving social group that is run in the main by the mentees, where they provide neurodivergent solutions to difficulties they might be experiencing. So that's where they have strong discussions about areas that they feel passionately about, because we know this group are amazing in so many areas, and they do provide, I think, some guidance for other mentees who are finding it difficult at different times.
Okay. So key duties of our specialist mentors. You can see these on the screen. Obviously communication with their mentees, meeting up with mentees weekly, writing their reports, understanding their mentee's profile, and finding a way in to actually build rapport with mentees is very important. Providing flexible and individualized support for their mentees. Our mentees are so very different and so very diverse, so finding the way that works for that person is really important. Encouraging them to attend the social group that we have, that's a big part of the programme. Increasing their independence, building up their goals, and linking them to appropriate services and clubs along the way.
Okay, this next slide is on what happens in the social group, and we also provide a Facebook page that is also run by the mentees, and they've got a Discord group. The social group, it is run in 2 aspects: the formal aspect where they have discussions and there's often presentations by the mentees themselves, and there's an informal aspect where they get together and they have game playing and a lot of fun. So yeah, just moving right along, I'm just sort of noticing the time is getting away from us.
So benefits of the CSMP, improving transition into tertiary study, higher retention. That's probably one of the biggest things where we managed to keep people on course because of their mentors' input, being able to connect them to services, improving their academic performance by helping them access the right study skills in the right areas, and improving social outcomes and greater personal development. And overall mental health and well-being improves as well. And then getting them ready for employment even before they think they're ready for employment.
So just to conclude, if anyone is interested in having a look at the way that our program works, we have developed a module that is available through the Autism Cooperative Research Centre, indicating the ways that we operate, all the processes that we undertake. And of course, we are open to receiving any inquiries with regard to how we do things. And we have just in the last couple of years developed through the University of Tasmania, Debbie Hindle, the Autism Mentoring Community of Practice, that everyone is very welcome to join. So the following slides have got all the research that has been done on the program. So if you are very interested in that, please make sure to have a look at what we have provided there. And we've also got our contact details.
Okay.
Thank you, Elaine and Jasmine. That's terrific.
Tried to keep to the time.
Thank you so much. That's really great. And obviously people can contact you through this or look at the materials through the link on that slide. So thank you. So I'd now like to introduce Elizabeth Radulski from Trobe University in Melbourne. Beth will be providing a brief outline of the Neurodiversity Hub project at Trobe University and how other universities could implement the same. Again, if you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A function and we'll come back to these after all the presentations. So over to you, Beth.
Thank you. So I'll go ahead and share my PowerPoint here before I get started. All right, so I'm going to be talking to you today about Trobe University's Neurodiversity Project, which began in November of 2019. So we're coming up to the 2-year mark, which is very exciting for us. And to sort of give a bit of context to the approach that we're taking in this area, I think it's important to specify that our approach to neurodiversity is really characterized by changing a culture and not the individual. So rather than looking at how we can change autistic or ADHD or dyslexic students and sort of fit them into a system that wasn't necessarily built with them in mind, we're really taking a holistic approach to looking at the university's culture, policy, procedures, and trying to make some changes so that it's neurodiversity accessible and friendly. I'm the first neurodiversity project officer, and my approach is really informed by my research background. I'm also an academic. So I'm a sociologist by trade, and I'm currently doing a PhD on neurodiversity and masking, and I'm also autistic myself. So this approach is informed largely by the views of sort of neurodiversity activists in the autistic community as to what would better facilitate inclusion in higher education and society more broadly. So when we started this project, as somebody who went through university as an undisclosed autistic person myself, it was really important for us to sort of address what are the barriers to inclusion and how does this relate to disclosure in particular. So I think, from a research perspective, it's important to note the cultural context in which we're trying to make changes and understanding why we're trying to make changes. So it's very clear in masking research in particular that autistic people overwhelmingly report feeling that they're not accepted in society, that they need to pass as neurotypical in order to achieve inclusion and avoid retaliation and bullying. And also that, there are a lot of fears around quite overt discrimination sometimes in terms of accessing jobs and qualifications that aren't necessarily going to be as accessible to them if they're visibly autistic. So in the higher education context, we want to be able to support students, but if students aren't disclosing, it can be quite difficult to support them. So it's important to address these barriers. Why aren't students disclosing, or why would a student mask and stay in the closet in higher education? So some of the questions that I think are worth raising are, is their reputation or career likely to suffer with a disclosure? Would they potentially have had bad experiences previously? What if they're an international student? Could they lose their visa, or could they lose the ability to apply for permanent residency at some point if they're openly autistic? And also, of course, depending on the field, are they likely to find employment in that field as an openly autistic person? So overall, I think it's really important to question if the benefits of disclosure are going to outweigh these massive risks that are very sort of overwhelming when we think of them on this big cultural level. So to fix big problems, you need big solutions, and these solutions have to be I guess, intersectionally informed, and they have to span this broad array of areas where we might be currently experiencing issues. So it's a very sort of multifaceted approach to creating cultural change that characterizes our project at present. So I'm just going to break down each of these dot points a little bit further in some more detail. So one of the first really important things to touch on is inclusion and representation. So in this case, our project is led by an autistic person. And this is helpful in setting a precedent for other staff and students as well, I think. When I was an undergrad, I didn't know any openly autistic or otherwise neurodivergent staff members. And I really questioned, would it be safe for somebody like me to come out if more senior people weren't even feeling comfortable in doing that? So I think it's really wonderful that La Trobe has been very supportive of that community-led initiative and sort of agency, and I guess community sovereignty, if you will, in determining what the project should look like and what its goals and mission should be. So a big part of that now includes cultural sensitivity and sort of changing this narrative on autism and disability as well. So one of the things we've been doing involves staff training and creating resources that can be shared, which will help staff and students to engage with the neurodiverse community in a culturally sensitive and respectful way. So one example of a document we've created is a cultural sensitivity and accessible event planning toolkit. So we've got a sort of comparison between symbols and understandings that quite well-intentioned people might come in with. It might be their only exposure to things like autism. Previously might be, you know, the puzzle piece or the Light It Up Blue campaign. But if you speak to the community, there are quite different views on how to promote acceptance and celebration. So we try to ensure that where people are going to be making efforts in this area, they're equipped to make efforts that are speaking to the community in the way the community wants to be spoken to, I suppose, both literally and metaphorically in terms of symbolism and other things. We're also working in a sort of equity and diversity context. So I'm currently working in our accessibility hub, which provides reasonable adjustment to support to both disabled students, carers, and various other marginalized groups on campus. So there are several areas that we're sort of exploring what constitutes reasonable adjustments. So this is just a little clip from one of our training seminars where perhaps we could conceptualize, I suppose, an intercultural communication as a form of reasonable adjustment, rather than expecting everybody to live up to the same standard. And my supervisor, Anthony Gardner, likes to say, you know, we shouldn't be aiming for equality where everybody's treated the same. We should be aiming for equity where different people are being treated in the ways that will support them to thrive equitably in an environment with a more level playing field. So I think this is a really great example of that. Not just saying, let's equip autistic people with social skills, for example, which is another way of saying, let's teach autistic people to not get bullied for acting autistic, but let's educate the neurotypical population as well on how to understand autistic communication, right? Because it's a two-way street. So another area that's obviously really important to us as a university is teaching and learning. So one of the things that we've been working on is also ally training for our academic staff. So, and this is really important that I think we take a strengths-based approach. So rather than asking students to kind of come to staff, disclose and identify all of the ways that they're not capable, all of the ways that they feel they're not able to do what their peers can do, we educate teaching staff and academic staff on a strengths-based approach. So, you know, everybody has different strengths, everybody has different limitations. We don't typically ask people to define themselves by their limitations. So I take the same approach to neurodiversity. We need to be identifying strengths and using these to the student's advantage wherever possible. So this is just another example of an activity we would do in one of those training sessions to try to work with strengths in our classrooms and in our assessment practices. And finally, environment is also very important. So campus and accessibility is also key here. We tend not to equate autism with a sort of physical disability where you need environmental adjustments, but oftentimes environment plays a huge role in overall accessibility. So one of the things we've done is create accessibility checklists that if people are going to be either working in classrooms or even planning special events, that they're able to ensure that the environment will be accessible for neurodiverse cohorts. And finally, all of this hopefully leads to acceptance and celebration rather than medicalization. So this is one of the biggest wins, and I know I need to wrap up, but I just need to plug this because we have our very first openly autistic lecturer, which I'm absolutely thrilled with. Dr. Benjamin Habib, a colleague of mine working in politics, and I just think it must be so profoundly powerful for students to actually have openly autistic representation on staff, because that just wasn't there just a very few years ago. So if you're interested in more information, or you've been sort of, I don't know, inspired, I suppose, and looking to take other steps, you can find some of these resources at advocateneurodiversity.com. And I'm going to wrap it up because I'm 30 seconds over time. So thank you so much for having me.
That was fabulous. Thank you so much. I'd now like to introduce Michelle Perry and Heather Ross from TAFE New South Wales in Sydney. They will be providing an overview of their SOCS program, which stands for Social, Occupation and Communication Skills. Again, if you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A function and we'll get back to them at the end of the session after this presentation. So over to you, Michelle and Heather.
Thank you.
Thanks,
and
Andrew.
I'll just share my screen, share the presentation. There we go.
Great. So, hello, I'm Michelle Perry.
Hi, I'm Heather Ross.
And we're teacher consultants for students with neurological disabilities in TAFE New South Wales. We're based at Ultimo and cover 6 campuses in the Sydney region. So, what do we do? Which is our next slide. We support neurodiverse students in all mainstream courses. So the courses that TAFE run range from Certificate 1 or Access courses through to TVET courses, which are run in conjunction with schools, trades apprenticeships, traineeships, through to diplomas and bachelor programs. Students make direct contact with us, and in consultation with the students, we assess their individual learning needs, and this forms the basis of their reasonable adjustment plan for their studies. What's been confirmed with Heather and myself over time is that the greatest challenge for students, often with autism, is not so much the content area, but the social interaction that's needed, with teachers and peers, and the stresses that creates for them in successfully completing their courses. So this led us to look at developing a short course for students focusing on their communication, which we've called the SOCS course.
Next slide, please, Andrew. And this is the SOCS course, Social, Occupation and Communication Skills. The course runs for about 8 weeks, twice a week, 2.5 days a week, and it targets students on the autism spectrum. What we do, we develop and practice communication skills needed for study and employment. We have a small class group with 2 teachers. It's very structured, consistent, predictable, a type of approach. And obviously at the moment we can't offer the program because we're in lockdown and this needs to be face-to-face. Teachers role model the interactions, and there's an opportunity for students to observe, comment, and then practice these exchanges. Each class starts with social interactions. Every time we meet, it's how are you? What's happening for you? Students share the difficulties they're experiencing, and then their peers share strategies, and the teachers share strategies. Any issues are raised, are discussed, and worked through. And then we also do a unit on appropriate career and study opportunities. Slide 4.
So the course outcomes are, number one, to develop an awareness of autism, self and others. So what we found was when we were talking with people on the spectrum, we'd say to them, you know, what are your strengths? What are you good at? What do you find easy? And sometimes people said to us, oh, that's interesting. No one's ever asked me that before. Or we've said to them, what does being on the spectrum mean for you? And what we were getting were a lot of negatives. So as, you know, has been said previously over a couple of days, we're looking at their strengths. Everything we come from is what they have, their strengths, what they can build on, what are their positives. And we talk about this a lot in the group. We talk about their experiences, and it's great to see them open up and share. And when someone says something and someone else might say, oh my goodness, I feel the same way, or that was my experience. So they actually find others that are like themselves. And so that's been a really positive feedback that we've got from the course. We build presentation and workplace communication skills into the course. So we do a lot of role playing, a lot of practice, a lot of picking up what's appropriate, getting them to comment on that, what's inappropriate. And again, we practice across different contexts of things, of interactions that might be needed at TAFE. So we practice the specifics of calling up a teacher. What happens if the teacher answers the phone? What are you going to say? We have a script. What happens if it goes to voicemail? What are you going to do then? So we do a lot of these practicing with scripts, and then sometimes students then will say, no, I'm not comfortable by saying that, and they come up with their own script, which is fantastic because then they can own that. So we do a lot of this, you know, knocking on doors, the actual practicalities of being in a TAFE environment. And what we've noticed is, you know, the anxiety that can raise, but also once they've achieved that and they're competent in that, their body language changes, you know, because they feel like they've conquered something that perhaps up till now they've found very daunting. We also manage conflict, change, and we look at teamwork challenges. And again, we talk about sometimes the stress and the anxiety that accompanies that, how it's okay for them to need downtime, that they will find this exhausting. That is okay, and that is normal, you know, when you're trying something new. And, you know, again, you know, coping with change. What happens if you go to your classroom and, you know, the class isn't there? You know, perhaps the teacher has forgotten to tell you that you're going to be in the library that day. So we practice and preempt these situations. We give them, where can you go for help? Who could you ask? What can you do? So that when things like that happens, they feel prepared. We also talk about and again practice, you know, being in class. What happens if someone next to you is clicking a pen all the time and that is annoying you? What are the things that you need to say to that person? What's appropriate to say to that person? When is it too much? When do you stop? So we sort of again practice that. Thanks, Heather.
We also focus on personal strengths. You know, we ask them to pick an activity or something in the community, a group activity that they might be interested in. Would some of them say, I want to join a gym, or I want to play basketball? We go, okay, find the contact. We help them research that. Then do the phone call, leave a voicemail message, go there in person. We work on enhancing their skills, and we say, yes, we know this is challenging for you. Yes, it's hard to call that person. And yes, you might be exhausted and you will need time out. But it's also great to see them achieve, and then they get that positive reinforcement from their peers. What the big thing for a lot of our students is organization and time management and planning. They find this, some of them find it exceptionally challenging. Alternatively, some of them are so good at it, but they do it and it becomes overly time consuming because they are perfectionists. So what we do is we work on really hands-on practical things. We give them timetables, rosters, and we say, okay, let's have a look at your weekly planner. And they plan their week and their life as a whole, what they put in the social time, the work, the study, personal care, downtime, etc. They put their assignment tasks in and they count back. It's the due date.
a week before that, I must have the final draft going, the second draft, etc. So we teach them how to work back and to prepare for that. We do a unit on pathways to further education and training. They'll say, oh, I want to direct films. Okay, what do we need? What are the skills you need? What is the study pathway necessary for you to be able to enter this field? So that's the sort of thing we work through. Can we have the next slide 3, please?
So the student feedback, again, they've reported to us an increased level of confidence and participation, in the class that perhaps they haven't experienced previously. And they do feel empowered, and they're able to articulate that at the end of the course. And for some of them, the independence might be, as Heather has said, that they might decide to join a group, or they might have decided on a volunteer work experience or volunteer experience, with a group that they want to pursue. The big thing is, they say, the opportunity to talk autism, to talk about themselves with people like themselves and feel accepted in that environment. And there is a pride in achieving communication goals, and that comes up time and time again. The ability to identify and build on their strengths. So again, that they will then talk more about what I'm good at, rather than the things I find difficult. So it's that change in even the communication and how they think and talk about themselves. And also helping them further articulate their triggers and be aware of things that might be causing their anxiety and stress. And again, build on those strategies of, if you feel like this, what you can do about it. And finally,
lastly, that was just a comment from a student. It was a wonderful experience. I'm really proud of my greatest achievement during my busy time with you. Thank you all.
Thank you. We'll just do a little bit of Q&A. So we've got a question from Griffith University. Do you think that a support service for autistic students sits better with a disability support framework or as a standalone service? I'm asking as I'm working to create a support group at my university. So I'm wondering if Elaine, Jasmine, you'd like to have a go at that one.
Well, one of the things that I was always concerned about when we came was that the name of the services that we were sitting under was disability services, because, as has been discussed by a number of the speakers, we take a strengths-based understanding of autism. And while, that up and down profile might be more marked for people on the spectrum, some of the people on the spectrum are unbelievable in some of the areas of competence. So it is a misnomer to say that it is disability services. I think we are now calling it accessibility services, which I think is a far better title. And like was said beforehand, we're very keen for the context of the university to understand the value in diversity and what it brings to the table, because we really believe that our young people, if given the right sort of environment, are going to be the ones who are going to be on the forefront of changing knowledge. So why wouldn't they be welcomed into a university and held up as being people that really should be here?
Okay, thank you. We've also got a question for Michelle and Heather, whether you know of any similar programs being offered in any other cities in Australia.
No, not at the moment, but that's not to say they're not there. Would you agree, Heather?
Yeah, really sorry. This one was piloted here some time ago, and we've continued to run it. And I know that there are other colleges that have at some time offered them, but we're working on this and trying to see if there is some sort of whole TAFE approach. Watch this space.
That would be great, because I think some of the TAFEs have got together on other things, and
yes.
There's actually a strong TAFE network around Australia, so that would be awesome if that could happen.
Thank you.
Another question is, any ideas of how to cope with school students in Melbourne's sixth lockdown? We now have our son enrolled in Virtual School Victoria, as last year's school was in person, online, in person, and online, and in person. So I was going through all these things. So any thoughts from anyone about how to cope with that, with the lockdown? Sorry.
I homeschooled my eldest for 4.5 years. And one of the things that I think is really important is to explore what the passions are of the person on the spectrum and see whether or not, you know, these can be tailored into some sort of movement toward employment later in life for like a business. Because I found that, you know, some of our young people on the spectrum, you know, they are years ahead in terms of their involvement in their areas of passion. So why not use that time to drill down more into those areas and ways that they can actually create a career path?
That's a great comment. And there's a question that might be for Beth. It's from Anna Hinder, and she's interested in the approaches or strategies that have not worked that others can benefit from understanding. And maybe Beth, you have your lived experience from when you were going through university before you came out when undergrad, and maybe can provide some perspective on that.
Sure. So that's a big question. I might need a second to think about that. Would it be okay if you ask another question first and I can take a second to reflect before answering?
Yes, I can. I haven't really got any. There's one question similar to the previous one.
Andrew, could I add something, if you don't mind?
You go ahead. Go ahead, Michelle. Yes.
Yeah, just based on, just following up from what Elaine said, you know, I think that's really important about the passions and the pursuits, because often at TAFE we have people coming out of school who struggled at school for a number of reasons. And they really do have, they've thought for a long time about what they want to do, the area they want to work in. They've pursued that. They've found themselves some work placement or work experience, or maybe even some part-time paid work in that area. When they come to TAFE, they're doing a course with everyone else in that room that is interested in the same course. And they find then that they fit with that group and they've got something to talk about, their common interests, and they can really do well. And I think that's what TAFE provides, that opportunity.
Fantastic. Yes, agree. Beth, anything you want to comment on, and then we'll wrap it up. Thank you.
Yeah, I've had a moment to script, so I have something to say now.
Right. Thank you.
But I think certainly what's worked for me, and also something that I try to encourage others to do and students that I work with, is not to, I suppose, hold themselves to the neurotypical standard of functioning, whether that's socially or academically or in terms of working during their degree, and instead to identify what their goals are, develop that sense of personal identity and personal growth and where they want to be and what they think their best is, and to aim for that. Because there are ways that, you know, for me personally, I will never keep up with a neurotypical person, not because I'm incapable of doing things, but because the system's stacked against me and I'm not going to keep up. Yeah. But I will totally outperform a neurotypical at other tasks, right? So I try to hold myself to the standard of like, what am I great at? Take that strengths-based approach and hold yourself to your standard as an autistic person, as an individual, as somebody with your own goals and missions and values. And I think that can quite profoundly alter your sense of self-esteem and self-worth.
Yeah. Thank you, Beth. That's fabulous answer. I'm going to hand back to Matt. Thank you very much, everyone, for your contributions.
Thank you.
Well, thanks, Andrew, and what a fantastic panel that was. And thank you very much, Beth, Elaine, Heather, Michelle, and Jasmine, for your brilliant thoughts there. One of the things that really captured me is that changing the culture, not the individual. And I think that's something that any of us that are in employment really need to take away and have a good think about. I'm super excited about what I heard with TAFE. I have my son going into TAFE next year, so please bring it to Victoria, to make a huge difference.